Yo, what's going on, my buddies? Totaljophes coming at you with some really depressing news for fellow Final Fantasy fans, as well as my thoughts on the whole matter. Okay, so for those of you who keep up with Final Fantasy XV, like myself, you probably already know by now, Final Fantasy XV's release date has been delayed to November 29th, 2016, so roughly about 2 months. Now, here's my thoughts on the matter. First off, I always thought that it was stupid that they were redoing Versus 13 in the first place. Now, I understand that because they were making it from an installment in the Fabula Nova Crystallis series into its own standalone entry into Final Fantasy, I understand that they had to change a lot of things. Pretty much the entirety of the lore, as far as I remember, I know Etro was a big part of it. And Etro is a Final Fantasy 13 thing, a Fabula Nova Crystallis thing. And that obviously doesn't work in 15 when it's supposed to be separate. But see, here's the beefs I have with that. They did have to change the myth, or the mythos, the mythology of all of it. I understand that. That's fine. That's cool. I get it. But they went a little wild with how much they changed that game. Like, they really did. Just because they were making it Final Fantasy 15, they went really far with changing things. Like, they changed a lot of shit that they really didn't have to change in the first place. Now, yes, it was on the PS3, and they were moving it to the PS4. And I know that there's a lot of complications that go along with doing that, but all things considered, moving it to the PS4 should have given them the, more power, more freedom. So there's a lot of things that they took out of the game that I really don't see why they took out. Like, earlier on, you were actually able to play as the other characters. You could play as Prompto, or Gladio, or Ignis. But then it's like, they moved it to Final Fantasy 15, now you can only play as Noctis. That's kind of stupid. On top of that, whereas they switched from Tetsuya Nomura to Hajime Tabata, well, Tabata got a lot more done. I will give him that. He got a lot more done than Nomura was, but at the same time, he also really changed a lot, and a lot of it I really don't like that he changed. Like, again, the switching from being able to play as everyone to just playing as Noctis. That's stupid. I mean, the fact of the matter is they still had that there. There's not really a reason to take it out. I don't see why they didn't just retool that to work on the PS4 instead, like most of the other stuff. And then there's some other things, like, one thing that I will never, ever get, no matter how much Square Enix tries to justify it, is why Stella had to be completely removed from the game to make way for Luna Freya. Now, I get that her role within the game needed to change, because the game itself was changing, but why didn't they just change her role? Why did they have to change her entire appearance and, everything that went, her name, everything that went along with that? Why did they need to do that? That wasn't necessary, like, at all. They could have kept Stella, but changed her role in the story, changed what part she played. I mean, yeah, I assume they pretty much did that with, like, everyone, considering that 15 changed very heavily when it became 15. So I assume that a lot of the things that, say, Noctis or Regis or people like that may have done probably changed when it became Final Fantasy 15. So with all of them changing, why does Stella's changing have to change her into a completely different character? That I thought was kind of stupid, and not to mention, whereas I do love what I've seen of Luna so far, I liked what I saw of Stella a little bit more, honestly. Whether or not I get hate for that, oh well, but that's my honest opinion, is I kind of liked what they were showing of Stella a little bit more than what they've shown of Luna so far. They've said multiple times that Luna is a very strong character, an inwardly strong character, whatever, but I'm like, I kind of want an outwardly strong character, too. Now, Luna kind of does look like she might have that, too. Like, I've seen some trailers and whatnot, and I've seen Luna with like a spear in her hands, and it looks like she's gonna fuck some shit up with that, and that's pretty badass, but I don't know, I just kind of liked Stella's design more, and it definitely seemed like she was gonna be more of a physical fighter than Luna's probably going to be. Now, they might both be physical fighters, but Stella seemed like she was going to be more so of that than Luna is, you know? And then, okay, I don't remember if it was ever actually confirmed, but I know that there was at least rumors, and I think it may have actually been confirmed, that Final Fantasy Verse 13 was going to be a rated M game. Which, I mean, that's badass. Not having to hold anything back, just unleashing everything that they wanted to. That was kick-ass. I mean, I don't know if Final Fantasy's had a lot of rated M games, and to my knowledge, I'm kind of looking over at my Final Fantasy games, and I can't think of any rated M ones. Was Verse 13 going to be our first one? Or it was going to be at least one of the first ones, and that was going to be cool. But now it's rated T, and I'm like, well, fuck! And it's, I don't know, there's just so much that they changed that I didn't like. So, whereas a lot of people are going to defend the delay for 2 months and be like, well, they had to change so much, they had to change so much, the entire game was changing, I'm sitting there like, but they didn't have to. That's their own dumb fault. I mean, they did have to change some, I get that, but they didn't have to change as much as they did. There's a lot that just felt really unnecessary, you know? Like they were taking it as an opportunity to make an entirely different game when they didn't have to. They just had to retool some things. And here's another thing. Okay. Making Final Fantasy 15 shouldn't have taken as long as it did. It's been, what, maybe 4 years? Something like that since they initially started the switch to 15? But see, here's the thing. You've got to remember that game design isn't just making the gameplay. It's making the art assets. It's coming up with the story and the characters and the weapons and everything like that. And just coming up with it all and drawing it all out, creating the art assets, you know, the concept art, all of that, that all takes a long time. But they already had that. They already had a running start when making Final Fantasy 15. They already had a lot of the assets. And yes, again, they changed a lot of stuff, but not everything. Like, for instance, they still had Noctis, they still had Gladio, they still had Ignis, they still had Prompto, they still had all of the towns they were going to use, they still had the basics of the combat they were going to use. They still had a lot of... They basically had a skeleton and just had to put the muscle and the skin on it, whereas most games start off from nothing. So, it's just like, okay, they had to change a lot, but they didn't have to. And even though they did, they still had a lot left over that they used to make Final Fantasy 15. So already, the sheer amount of time that it was taking to make this game was a little unnecessary. And, you know, that can easily be explained by the fact that, you know, they did go through a lot of developmental changes. I'm sure it just, in general, went through development hell. I'm sure there's a lot of disagreements, you know, people coming in and out. I get that. But let's be honest, all of that was probably a direct result of their own faults, you know? Like, again, I hate to keep bringing this up as an example, but they didn't have to make it completely different. They could have used most of what they had. They just had to change the lore and the mythology. That's pretty much mostly it. And any other connections that it might have had with the 13th saga. And, I mean, if it's anything like Type 0, it doesn't have that many connections to 13. So, really, they didn't need to change a whole lot. And I'm just completely pissed that it took them that long to do something that they didn't have to do, okay? Now, on top of that, another reason I'm really pissed off about this delay is, do any of you remember Uncovered Final Fantasy 15? That was the gigantic, huge event that they sold tickets to and everything. That was pretty much exclusively revolving around the fact that they were finally announcing the release date. Now, yes, they announced plenty of other things too, but the main piece of info, the whole point of that event existing, was ultimately because they were announcing the release date. But they just decided to add a lot on top of that to justify it actually being an event. But regardless, because that was an event revolving around the release date, they made such a huge deal out of this. It was such a momentous occasion that they announced the release date, and I'm sitting there thinking, So you made this giant event, you made a huge big deal because you were going to announce the release date, and you weren't even sure it was going to release then. Because the fact of the matter is, the reason that they're delaying it is because some things aren't done. Which means way back in March when they announced the release date in September, there was even less done. They had even less of an idea of when the game was going to come out, but they assumed it would come out in September. Now, when you're going to assume something, you shouldn't make a gigantic, huge deal out of announcing the release date. It's kind of stupid. It gets a lot of people's hopes up, so then a delay like this hits them that much harder. And that's the main reason why I'm so pissed off about the delay. I definitely want them to delay it. I definitely want them to make sure that the game is 100% polished when they release it. But the fact that they made such a huge deal out of it and got my hopes so far up for a September release, just to delay it a couple of months, it's kind of ridiculous. It's way different than when a developer announces a release date, but then it gets delayed. Square Enix celebrated the release date, but then delayed it again. And it's like, that's kind of stupid. All the hype, all the build-up, just for them to delay it, it's kind of ridiculous. And, okay, my last and probably biggest beef with this is this. Final Fantasy XV has taken a total amount of 10 years for them to finally come out with this game, okay? Now, yes, there was a lot of development changes that happened. Yes, they had to completely retool the game, even though they didn't have to. Yes, a lot of things happened, but the fact of the matter is, even if we're just counting it as Final Fantasy XV, that's still about 4 years, right? Lost Soul aside. Lost Soul aside. If you guys don't know what that is, go on YouTube and look up the trailer for it right now. It is a game that is currently in production, made by one man, not a whole team, not a whole company, one guy. Literally, it's almost as if I made a game right now. Literally, it's that. One guy, okay? And it took him 2 years. That's half the time that Square Enix has been working on Final Fantasy XV, if we don't count all the time that they've been working on Final Fantasy Versus 13, which should have made the production time of 15 even less. And on top of that, Lost Soul aside looks better than Final Fantasy XV. Its graphics are just as good, the combat looks better, and the story looks like it's taken directly out of a Final Fantasy. So basically, one guy made a game that looks better than Final Fantasy XV in 2 years, than an entire fucking company made in 4 to 10 years. It already looks better. And I'm like, how can you live with yourself, Square Enix? For God's sake, I understand that there was difficulties, but if one man can make a game that looks better than your game in 2 years, I think 10 years is enough for you to at least get the game out when you promise you're going to get it out, and not delay it another 2 months. Really? So there you have it, guys. Those are my thoughts on the Final Fantasy XV delay. Don't get me wrong, I want them to delay it. I want this game to be perfect when it comes out. I'm just disappointed of all the reasons why this delay happened. Not the delay itself, just the reasons why. The reasons why are ridiculous. And that is my thoughts on the whole matter. So now we have to wait another 2 months for this game. But honestly, I'm already a little bit more hyped for Lost Soul aside than I am for Final Fantasy XV, and that's saying something. But what are your guys' thoughts on the matter? I mean, like I said, I like the fact that they're delaying it, but do you like the reasons why, too? I mean, I don't see why you would, but all the same, let me know in the comment section down below. Are you just as pissed as I am? Not necessarily about the delay, but about the reasons why. Or are you just straight out pissed about the delay? Do you want the game to come out and to just get the day one patch later, or whatever? Let me know. Leave that all in the comment section down below. Definitely leave a like on this video, and definitely subscribe for future videos, because I will be uploading multiple every week as usual. So, that'd be about it. So until next time, stay pretty, my buddies.